All right. Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar this afternoon on employee wellness during COVID-19. My name is Meg Beyer, and I'm part of the MCTAC, or Managed Care Technical Assistance team, and we are really thrilled today to be partnering with the Office of Mental Health, OMH, to deliver this webinar. I will introduce our wonderful presenter at the end of my little logistics moment. But again, I'm happy to see some folks on the line with us today, and I'll just run through some brief details and logistics before we get started. So to begin with, our webinar today is going to be recorded, and the recording, along with the slides, are going to be made available after the webinar. So if you are able to join, but maybe some of your colleagues were not, and you'd like to share this with them, you will receive an email with instructions on how to access the recording and the slides following today's webinar. It usually takes our system about 48 hours to download this information, so bear with us. You'll get the recording and the slides in a few days. Also, we do have time set aside after our presenter walks through the material to answer some questions that you might have. So we encourage you to chat in your questions. You don't have to wait until the end. You can chat them in throughout the course of the webinar. And then at the end, we're collecting the webinar or the questions throughout the entire webinar, but at the end, we'll review all the questions that came in and try and answer as many as we can. One thing I did want to ask is that if you do want to chat in a question, if you are looking at the chat box functionality, which should be seen on the lower right-hand side of your screen, if you see the little line that says send to, what I'm asking you to do is select that on the right-hand side, that little arrow, and chat into all panelists the question that you have. That way, all of our panelists and presenters can see the question. Sometimes we get a lot of questions at once, and it's helpful just for all the panelists to see everything that's coming in. So with that, I want to again thank you all for joining us today and thank our wonderful presenter, Dr. Lauren Meath from the Office of Mental Health, who is going to take us through the material today. So Dr. Meath, would you like to get started?
Yes, great. Thank you, Meg. Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Meath, and I'm a psychologist for the Office of Mental Health. And I would just like to thank everyone for taking the time out of your day to attend this presentation today on employee wellness during COVID-19. I'd just like to start off by saying that everybody is impacted in some way right now. Everyone's lives have been impacted, and a lot of people are feeling stressed, and that's a normal response during times like this, whether you've been directly impacted by the virus or not. So I just think it can be helpful to remember during times like this that we're all in this together right now. So everyone who experiences a disaster is affected in some way. And as I was just saying, stress and anxiety are completely normal reactions to abnormal situations. And it can be helpful to keep in mind that after an initial stress response, most people will cope effectively and grow stronger from it. It's also important to remember that we might experience a wide range of emotions when faced with a crisis or disaster, and not everyone will experience the same emotions. So it can be helpful to try to identify your emotions, check in with yourself about what you're feeling, and allow yourself to experience that without judgment. So you might want to try to put a name to your emotions, just notice what you're feeling, and then try to use your coping skills to move through it. Or you might notice that you're having trouble exactly identifying what you're feeling, and that's okay too. It can still just be helpful to check in with yourself about that. And if you do find that you're struggling, maybe your coping skills aren't helping as much as they usually do, it can be helpful to reach out for more support, and your EAP can be a good resource for that. So in discussing maintaining well-being, during this time, we might feel a loss of control. We can't control what's going on in the world around us, but keeping a regular schedule can help us feel a little bit more in control in our daily lives and help with maintaining well-being. So showering at a time you usually would, getting dressed in your regular clothing, and trying to eat at regular meal times. Also, a lot of us are caring for a loved one right now, which is something we're not used to juggling during our workday. Whether you're at home and your family is there, or maybe you're at the office, but you just have more people calling you and checking in during the day. Expect that these interruptions are going to happen during this time and try to accept them without judgment. and just recognize that your workday might be unconventional right now. Now, scheduled breaks are also very important, and just setting aside time during the day to engage in some kind of activity we enjoy. Now, I know everyone's busy with work, but I think it's more important now than ever to really set aside that time to take care of ourselves. So there are some things right here you can do right at your desk, maybe some chair yoga, doing some breathing exercises, or calling someone to just check in during the day. Or maybe you do feel like you can step away for a little bit. Maybe getting some fresh air or going for a walk would be helpful for you. It doesn't have to be, a long activity, but just something that you enjoy that you can do during the day for yourself. Healthy eating and sleeping are also important to maintaining well-being. Try to prepare healthy meals and snacks the night before your workday so you don't fall into unhealthy habits during times of stress. Also, maintaining a regular schedule for sleep can be helpful. Now, a lot of people might have trouble falling asleep at night when they're feeling stressed and anxious. So it can be helpful to engage in some meditation before bed to help decompress from added stress during the day. Just take some time and maybe help your body calm down before bed. I think it's also important to discuss media limits. The amount of media exposure during a crisis such as this can start to feel overwhelming if we're consuming it constantly. So try limit checking media related to COVID-19 to 1 time per day and only look at areas that are relevant for you, so where you work and live or maybe where your family is. Another suggestion is to practice gratitude. Every day, try composing a short list of things you're grateful for. It might seem like a benign task, but it can help us get our minds off the stress and anxiety we've been feeling, even if it's just briefly. Something more specific is you could try making a positivity mural somewhere that's highly visible to your family if you want to do it at home, or to your coworkers if you're going to do it at the office. Everyone can write things on there each day that they're grateful for, and that can be helpful for us to remember that there are things to be grateful for in our lives, but maybe we've overlooked during times of stress. And the last note on maintaining well-being is just to remember to be kind to yourself and others right now. Try not to overwhelm yourself. You might not be capable of maintaining balance in every area of your life right now. Maybe you feel like you're not accomplishing as much as you usually do, and that's okay. Try to be kind to yourself and non-judgmental about that. Also, be kind to others. People deal with stress in lots of different ways, so try not to take others' behaviors or their ways of managing personally right now. Now, a sense of community can also help us to decrease stress, and that might seem challenging right now when we're practicing social distancing, but there are still lots of ways we can communicate with loved ones and friends and just reach out for support when we need it and offer our support to others. So online platforms can be a great way to stay in contact with others. Also, just making a phone call or maybe even sending a card, if that's a way you like to check in with people. And I know that the current crisis is really on everyone's minds, but try to remember to talk about some other things as well to help maintain some sense of normalcy. Now, we've been talking a lot about managing our own emotions, which can be challenging during stressful times, but also a lot of us are trying to manage the emotions of children or other loved ones right now as well. So it's helpful to maintain open communication. Try to create a safe space for others to process how they're feeling, so being non-judgmental and validating of their feelings, and just expect that others are going to have a different experience and accept that, allow space for that. And then even if someone is experiencing the same emotion, that could be experienced in different ways. So one person might experience anxiety as an inability to focus, but a child might experience it as a stomach ache, for example. So I wanted to talk a little bit about considerations for managers. A lot of people might be in a supervisory role right now, and they're wondering how they can best support their staff. So it's important to keep your staff informed. Set a regular meeting time for updates. And even if there's no new information to share, keep that regularly scheduled time and just let them know that there are no updates. And that can help them still feel in the loop and connected with you about what's going on at work. Also, check in regularly with your staff. Reach out to them. Ensure they're engaging in self-care. And also thank them. Thank them for the work they're doing right now. Your words are important during times like this. Now, a lot of people are also dealing with grief, and you might be supervising individuals that are experiencing grief right now. And that could be in lots of different aspects of their lives. Perhaps they've lost a loved one, or they're just feeling the loss of connection. Maybe they're feeling isolated. Be mindful that productivity might be affected in times of stress. And try to be supportive and model for them that it's okay to grieve. Validate whatever they've been feeling and experiencing related to their grief. And lastly, touch base with other leadership staff. It can be easier to support your own staff if you have a support network of other people. And maybe you and other leaders can also share ideas about how to best support your staff. So then the last slide here are just some coping resources. The New York State Emotional Support Helpline is available to all residents of New York. That's been set up by the Office of Mental Health, and that's to offer support related to stress and anxiety you might be feeling from COVID-19. The number is here on your screen, 1-844-863-9314. That's available 7 days a week from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. And then there's also a link to a YouTube video here. That's from the Office of Mental Health Commissioner, Dr. Sullivan, and that's some additional information on managing anxiety during COVID-19. So I'd just like to, again, thank everyone for attending this today. I hope it was useful in encouraging self-care and offering some strategies for managing stress and anxiety during this time.
Thanks so much, Dr. Meath. That was very helpful, and I know I always learn something about my own wellness and how to care for my colleagues and others during this really, confusing, fraught, and unprecedented time. So on that note, it's just, it's always good to talk about this. I think wellness at the center of this all is just one really important way for us to ground ourselves and also adapt to this new environment that we're in at the moment. So on that note, I'm going to ask folks to chat in their questions. We have plenty of time to talk with Dr. Meath about, if you have any tips or thoughts or suggestions that you'd like around any particular area. We have some time to do so. So if you could chat in your questions using the chat box functionality. We're going to collect them. I'll read them to Dr. Meath, and then we'll do our best to answer. The other thing as you're chatting in your question is just to remember that these slides and the recording are going to be made available after the webinar today. So we're recording this webinar. We'll circulate the slides and this recording to everyone who registered so that you can refer back to it, maybe share it with some colleagues who weren't able to join, and yeah, just have it as a resource to look back on as we move forward. So I'll give folks a few minutes, maybe 2 minutes, and then I'll pop back on to see if we have any more questions. Unless Dr. Meath, you wanted to say anything else at the moment.
No, I can't think of anything else right now. Yeah, I would just, encourage people, if you have any other thoughts or questions, feel free to type them out to us.
Great. So we'll give you a couple minutes to chat in your questions, and then we'll be back. Okay, so I've given folks a couple minutes. I don't see any questions that have come in, but I do want to just give people a little bit more time in case there's one question that just popped into your mind so you have time to type it in. We would love to be able to spend some time and answer any specific questions that you might have. So we're not going to sign off just yet. We might give folks another 5 minutes or so, but just did want to see if there were any questions out there. I know usually the questions are around, can we access this information afterwards? Absolutely. Once the recording is available, we'll be able to share it with you all. But in the meantime, if you have any specific questions, I know in the past when we've done these webinars, Dr. Meath, feel free to jump in here, but sometimes people have just asked about questions about like working at home with kids and how to balance that and what sometimes how challenging it can be, working with folks who might be in the middle of grieving and it's really challenging to kind of support them, through their process of grieving, but also being, present for work. So I know there might be a ton of different questions out there. If folks want to use the next couple minutes, we are happy to answer them. And yeah, we'll be here for a couple more minutes. Okay, so this is Meg from McTac again. I'm back, and we haven't seen any questions come in. So this is I'm going to say this is our last call for questions. I want to thank, Dr. Meath for sharing all that you did around wellness and some tips and thoughts. Before we conclude, I just wanted to open it up to Dr. Meath just to see if there was anything else you wanted to add.
Yeah, just hopefully, the things in the webinar were helpful. I just think that one of the main takeaways is how important it is to engage in self-care during this time. When we're feeling stressed, and like you were mentioning earlier, Meg, people are juggling a lot of things right now. They're working from home, maybe their family is home, perhaps they're also dealing with grief. I just think that one of the important things to remember is self-care and doing whatever is something that you enjoy and helps you deal with stress a little bit better. I think that's really the main thing to remember. And as you were saying, these slides will be available if anyone wants to revisit them later and, revisit the tips and strategies we talked about.
Great. Well, thank you. We still don't have any questions, so I think, Dr. Meath, if it's okay with you, I think we might end this webinar, and we'll be sure to get these resources out to folks as soon as possible.
Sure, sounds good, and thank you again, everyone, for attending today.
Thank you all. Take care.